Welcome, everyone. My name is Bryan Hadzik. With me is Dave Lampson here. He's going to be monitoring the Q&A. So please keep this interactive as we're going along. Please ask questions and so forth. We'll try and get those answered. Just like Larry said, this is kind of a replacement of those lunch and learns that we've done in the past. We like this format since we can invite lots of different people all around the country, right? You know, it's a little bit easier than, going to 14 different cities and giving a presentation. So
and I liked Larry's gimmick with the city behind us and having people identify it.
Yes.
Those of you who joined late, we had a little contest as somebody won a $50 gift card. I think Larry's trying to incent everybody to make sure they show up on time for these things.
That's right. Well, thanks for joining. Today we're going to be talking about our Ivanti Neurons product. This really is a great product that I want to make sure we educate all of our customers on what it is, what it does. It's really central to Ivanti's go-forward strategy around their different technologies. You've probably been paying attention. Maybe you came from a customer that was a former Landes customer, a former Heat customer, something like that, or Mobile Iron, or PulseSecure, et cetera. There's been a lot of acquisitions over the years. Neurons is the answer of kind of tying all that together. How do we get these disparate systems? Mobile Iron, for example, was a separate independent organization. How do we tie that into the rest of the ecosystem? The Neurons platform is what does that. It brings it all together and tries to unify these different technologies. It's not going to replace, for the most part, those ambient services that exist out there, but it's going to bring it all together in one place.
Yeah, and what I've noticed is with almost every demo you do now for anything in the Ivanti portfolio, you're bringing Neurons into the conversation because it does fit across the portfolio.
It does, yeah. It's kind of got a piece to play in lots of different things. When someone says, well, what does it do? The answer is, well, it does 9 different things. It just kind of depends on the context. And customers adopt it for different reasons. Maybe some need more discovery as part of an asset project, or other people are looking at the edge intelligence as part of a systems management project and things like that. So that gives us the ability to, kind of cherry pick the parts that are interesting to us and leverage that as part of a bigger picture.
Yeah, and I'm going to ask one question right off the bat. I don't think we can assume that everybody on this call is a current Ivanti customer or prospect. Right. Neurons can benefit those who even do not own other Ivanti products.
Yeah. It is a standalone product, and it can live and breathe on its own, and it's got some of its cool features. I'm going to show a lot of that today, where it could just be standalone. If you're not even in the Ivanti family yet, what it can do on its own. But then it can also go and integrate. So it's great. It's a hybrid of both. Existing customers can take advantage of it, and net new customers can take advantage of it.
And I don't believe Larry mentioned it at the start, but at the end we're going to talk about how customers can see this in their own environment.
Yep, absolutely. Okay, so let's go over to the whiteboard. I want to show you a little bit about kind of the architecture of what it looks like. So I want to try and draw the big picture of what a lot of customers kind of see in the long run, and then I'll show you a little bit more about what it actually looks like in the console. So first of all, customers, when they talk to me, they say, hey, I've got lots of different problems, but one problem that I have is I've got lots of tools. Customers out there, they say, okay, well, we've got things like Active Directory. Active Directory, it's ubiquitous. We've got lots of information in it, but it's notoriously stale and out of date, and not incredibly useful from like an asset perspective. Well, maybe we're a VMware shop as well. So, I store my server information inside of VMware, and that's kind of where that lives. But it's missing information from workstations and printers and routers and things like that. Or maybe we're trying to make that transition over to the cloud. Maybe I've got AWS or Azure, and we have servers or services that exist up there that kind of live in a different ecosystem. Or, additionally, I have, maybe Mobile Iron, and that's storing my mobile device management systems. Or maybe I came over from the PulseSecure line of products, and I have, the Pulse Profiler that's doing discovery, or Rapid7 that does my vulnerability management. So I've got lots of tools, I've got lots of stuff, and they've got lots of data inside of them. But they're oftentimes kind of in a silo. They live by themselves, they're independent and separate from each other, especially when it relates to things like discovery and asset management. I just don't have a nice way to bring all that information together. And so if I were to come up here and say, hey, I have maybe a CMDB or an AMDB. In our products, that's the same thing. We use our CMDB for both an asset database and a configuration management database. If I were to bring that information and just kind of bring it right up in there, what's going to happen? What kind of problems exists when I do something like that? Well, the problems I have is I can have duplicate records. Think about it. You might have a device that exists here and here and here and here. I don't want to bring over 4 copies of that and have that repeated over and over again. And so here's what we want to do. This is where Neurons kind of is going to come into play. It's going to be the central aggregation point for that information. We have these things called connectors. Whereas a connector, I can have a very simple connection that goes into the various applications that you have on your network. And this is just a small sampling. We've got 40-something connectors out there. And we're going to scoop up that information and we're going to go park it over in something called a data lake. So a data lake is just a way where the data is going to land until we're ready to use it. Maybe there's certain attributes that we need to clean up. We can normalize the data and take away out of a lot of the noise. We can deduplicate it, so we can make sure that we only have one copy of that particular device. So we're going to, here we normalize and deduplicate. And then from there, we're going to bring it over into our database. That way it's nice and clean and fresh and kind of ready to go. So one of the things we can do is import data from these external data sources. But then another thing we can do is actually install an agent. We have an agent that works with Neurons that can go on our, our desktops and laptops and Mac and PC and things like that. And it's going to report back up its information, and it's going to provide some really cool real-time stuff. What's going on right here, right now. But then additionally, what it can do is it can probe your network. So, you've got a bunch of devices out there, and maybe some of them have an agent already on them. We're going to elect one of them to be the discovery engine for that subnet. And when someone comes onto the network and they plug into the network, they do a gratuitous ARP. We're going to have that device listen for that. And so a brand new device comes online. We don't know the status of it. It's going to have the agent's going to have essentially a database of all of the MAC addresses that exist in the ecosystem that we've kind of known about already. If it's a new one that we don't know about, it's actually going to probe that device with a series of credentials, and if it succeeds, it's actually going to report that information back in the database as well. So it helps us discover devices that maybe we didn't know about. And that's great when we're doing it with that ARP, that passive discovery style, because especially in this new hybrid world, when people are coming and going around the office, they're not always in the office 8 to 5. It's easier to catch them by recognizing when they plug into the network. So that agent gives us the ability to go and probe that, as well as do some other cool stuff. We'll talk about that edge intelligence as part of that. So this is kind of what the Neurons platform looks like. For those that are in the Ivanti ecosystem already, know that there's going to be a little bit of a nomenclature change, and you probably already see it. For example, our previously called Service Manager product is called Neurons for ITSM. Our asset management product is called Neurons for ITAM. So know that Neurons brand name is going to get applied to other things as well. Today we're talking specifically about the Neurons platform. Most customers don't already have this, so there's a good chance that if you were in the Ivanti ecosystem, this is something net new to you. But just know that we have that from a branding perspective. We're taking that Neurons name and applying it to other things. Neurons for ITSM and Neurons for Asset is a very common thing that you're going to run into now, especially if you're in the cloud. They probably already even rebranded your tenant to say that today. Okay, so that was a quick run through on the whiteboard of kind of the concepts and the idea and the architecture. Let's come over here and I want to show you a little bit more about what it looks like here at the news desk. So I want to show you what the system looks like. It is a cloud-based interface, as you can see right here, and we don't require any kind of connectivity like VPN or anything like that. So everything you're going to see is just done across the internet. Our agent uses something called the MQTT. It's an IoT protocol to make it very efficient and bandwidth oriented so that we could do this against potentially thousands of machines. This is my favorite view right here. This is the map view, where I can actually see my devices in real time and where they're at. This is something that is relatively unique. We've struggled with this in the past when we said, where are our devices? Where is our stuff? it was hard to kind of represent that. So this gives us a great visual representation of that. I can kind of zoom in and go look at individual devices. We actually can use GPS information so that if it's got a GPS chip, this is actually the building that we're in right there and where this device is actually located. Or we can use the IP address if we don't have GPS on that device to locate where it's at. If I want to, I can go click on an individual device here. So when I click on that device, it's going to go and actively query it. Now, I want you to pay extra attention to what I just did. When I clicked on it, it actually went and did a real-time query against that device across the internet with no VPN and pulled back that CPU and memory information. And what, it took 1 second to render that, something like that? That really is the power of the tool, that since it's born and bred in the cloud, it can react in that fast of a way. Hey, I've got a problem here. I've got lots of RAM usage. Maybe I'm an analyst and I want to worry about that because they're using too much memory. Or I can click on Chrome and see that Chrome's using 5% of that. Internet latency over the side, reliability index. So a real quick splash of what's going on with this device, but maybe I want a little bit more information. So I'm going to click on the device dashboard. It's going to take me to the device dashboard. Again, it's going to go in and probe it for performance information and so forth. So that'll take a second to render here. But you can see I've got the general information. I've got the IP address, various data sources, storage information, CPU and memory down there at the bottom. Over here on the left-hand side, I can click on performance, and it's going to tell me more about the individual processes and services that are running on that. So, here I can tell you, hey, this CPU is at 5% using this particular application. Maybe I should go and stop that. Or let's go to the services tab, and maybe I'm troubleshooting their problem, and it's because their print spooler's not running. So let's go down here and find the print spooler and start or stop a particular service. So a quick insight into that individual device right there. On the right-hand side, you can see I have various actions. I could go and create an incident from it. I could execute a script, or I could remote control that device. I could, one of my favorites is detect outages. It takes me to the network console here. If I'm an analyst and I picked up the phone and this customer called in and said, got problem X, Y, or Z, don't I want to know their IP address and their IP configuration? I can just run it right there. So think about normally what would have happened to get this. If I'm a technician, I would have had to answer the phone. I've got to remote control. I've got to kick the user off. I've got to impact them. I'm 4 or 5 minutes before I actually have this information. Now, I ran an IP config on that machine. Here's a fun fact. This user right here does not know that I'm even necessarily doing this to their machine. This is one of our employees that's in the middle of their normal workday, and they don't know that I'm probing their machine and taking a look at it. Maybe I want to go down here and do a ping. Let's go and ping Google and see what kind of latency that we get, or a trace route or something like that. Again, look at how quickly I was able to do that without having to go through all the process of remote controlling and going through that. Edge Intelligence gives me the ability to kind of ask questions. Maybe I want to look at the boot stats. Tell me the reboot history on this particular device. They say, oh yeah, I just rebooted. Well, no you didn't. I don't have any reboot history here, and your device uptime says that you've been up for 72 days. So obviously you are not rebooting your computer here. So I can get that kind of information. Or maybe I want to know more about, installed internet browsers or Windows Store applications or logon stats, or lots of different goodies that I can get right there. Here under software, I can get more information about what applications are installed. I can take a look at the individual details. This is that data lake that I described, that real deep information that I've gotten, and down to a very detailed level. Even if I want to go down here to like memory and look at the number of memory slots that I have, I can tell you what's in individual memory slots. So very detailed inventory, and then we store it here in this inside this data lake. So this is great information for one machine. What about a bigger picture? What if I need to know a little bit more what's going on in my environment? Let's go back over to Edge Intelligence and kind of that map view again. Oftentimes you're going to get questions about what your environment looks like, or what's kind of going on, or what the problem is. And we've got this little search box right up here at the top, and this is really cool. This is amazing. I can ask it questions. What if I want to say things like logon performance? Logon performance, it's going to go and track all of the logon stats for all of my different devices. Wait a minute, why do we have some in the yellow? Let's go take a look at that. Okay, we've got this user. They're averaging 45 seconds of logon time. That's not great. What's the details on it? Well, I can actually go look at that individual logon session and then look at a Gantt chart of what was happening. Oh, was it, loading the user profile, or, mapping drives that was causing this slowdown, or, what's the exact issue? Oh, look right there. It's some Teams update something or another we were stuck at for 10 seconds on this particular logon session. So we track that kind of information. What if I want to know things like local admins? Now it's what I've asked the system, and notice that I did it with just a natural language search. Things like Google have spoiled us. You just go there and vomit out information. It tells you exactly what you wanted. We have the same kind of thing. I can just type in local admins, and it knows what I meant when I said that. Wait a minute. Why do we have unexpected local admins here? That's not right. We shouldn't have that user be there because it's not part of our, domain admins or something like that. Maybe I need to go remove them from local admins. Or let's search for disk encryption. So disk encryption is going to be for both Mac and PC, and it can tell me, wait a minute, I've got a bunch of devices that are not encrypted. Here's the devices, and they're not encrypted. And I could go over here and create an action if I wanted to actually apply disk encryption or turn on BitLocker or something like that. So lots of different actions I can go kick off here at this point. So we give you a bunch of sample down here at the bottom in case you don't know what questions to ask. Maybe you want to know about smart hard drive status. Can tell you about that, or any hard drives failing, or tell me browser extensions for Chrome and what that looks like out in my ecosystem. And all of this is asking these devices in real time. So this information is hyper accurate and showing up here. So that's our edge intelligence. It gives us some really cool insight into it. We even did a ransomware webinar a while back where we were going through a simulated ransomware attack where we were in the middle of the attack and it was happening right now. And I could see what kind of connections were happening out there. Who's connecting to the command and control server on what port, and maybe I need to go and turn on a firewall for these devices, or have that be part of my reclamation process.
Hey, Brian.
Yeah.
We got a question from a current Ivanti Endpoint Manager customer, wants to know, sees some overlap and wants to know if this is a replacement for Endpoint Manager.
Yeah, good question. So the short answer is no. This is not a replacement for Endpoint Manager. This is a supplement or add-on on top of it. There are some things Endpoint Manager does that are not really designed for the cloud. Imaging is probably the biggest example of that. Could you imagine copying down a 24 gig image to a machine across the internet on someone's crummy Wi-Fi, or pixie booting? Those kinds of things just don't exist in a cloud world. It's too complex. So for those customers that need things like very specific patching controls and bandwidth controls and imaging, they're probably going to stick with Endpoint Manager, and they're going to add on Neurons on top of it. So they can still gain all these benefits. We can coexist with it. We should coexist with it. But it would be an add-on in addition to versus a replacement. However, if a customer says, you know what, all I need is inventory and remote control and maybe a little bit of light patching, that's all I'm after, then yes, it could be a replacement for EPM. But my professional opinion, based on all the customers I've talked to, most customers will stick with EPM and just simply add Neurons on top of it. I've got another question here. Why does Discover Agent trump the filters enter under connectors? Meaning we have devices listed that are being picked up by Discovery Agent scans that are excluded in Microsoft Active Directory connectors. We're going to have to take that question offline. I don't know the answer to it right off the top of my head, so we're going to have to do some research and find out. So Larry's going to make a note of who asked that question. We'll follow up afterwards.
And while you're still answering questions, we did get one more. Is whitelisting included in Neurons?
No. So application whitelisting or blacklisting or reputation-based or trusted, like our application control has the ability to do, is not a current feature inside of the Neuron suite. Okay, so good questions. Keep them coming. Let's go talk about a couple of other things. I want to talk about those connectors. Connectors give us the ability to ingest that information from another location, just like we talked about. So if I go in here and click on Add Connector, you can see I have a bunch of connectors listed here. This is just a sample of some of the things that we can connect to. Things like AWS or CDW, CrowdStrike, Insight, Sharewell, Ivanti Endpoint Manager, Microsoft Endpoint Manager, Intune, SCCM, Jamf, Microsoft 365, Active Directory, Azure Active Directory, Okta, OneLogon, Qualys, Rapid7, VMware, ServiceNow, Workspace ONE, etc. So how do we use these? What's the setup process? Well, it's easy. Let me click on VMware just to show you. I'd come in here and say, VMware, and I would say the server is, that, and I would put in my credentials down here in the bottom, whatever my credentials are going to be. And I'd say, hey, let's repeat this every single day at 6 a.m. And that's it. You know, how long did it take me to set up? A couple of minutes? And then now I can ingest information from, from Active Directory, from VMware, from all these different places. I can scoop up that information and bring it in. So this is a great way to gather that data together and present it in that data lake. So now if we go click on our devices, remember this is kind of a temporary holding pool. I probably want this to eventually go up to my asset management platform as kind of the final destination, so I can track things like, purchases and POs and warranties and, depreciation and all that kind of stuff. But here it is in that data lake, and you can see, I've got a big smattering of different things, from phones to workstations to desktops to servers to et cetera, et cetera. All of these different devices are going to show up here, that have been ingested from many different methods, even those connectors. If we go down here and click on the discovery section, we can configure how we are going to go and find those different devices out there. Remember how we talked about that agent that can get installed and that can snoop on its neighbors? Here under our discovery scans, you can go in and put the various subnets that you have out there, and then you can see we have an elected scanner over here on the right-hand side. And that's where we can just automatically pick someone in that subnet. We understand subnets and subnet masks, and we know where everyone lives, and so we can just say, hey, let's elect someone to be the kind of the narc on that particular subnet. And then here under settings, you would go in and say, okay, hey, I'm going to specify some credentials, some SNMP credentials for printers and routers and switches and things like that, and then some Active Directory or other credentials to be able to talk to an individual device itself. So that's how you can set up the discovery to then go look on the network, find those devices, and potentially send that upstream to your asset management platform. All right, let's go and talk about some of our smart advisors that we have here. One of my favorites is the device reconciliation. Many, many times I have customers come in and say, I ask the question, how many devices do you have? And they say, well, Active Directory says 4,000, but SCCM says 6,000, and our networking tool says 9,000. And that's their answer. The answer is not, and we trust it or we know, it's, hey, I've got all these data points and none of those data points are good enough. So device reconciliation is cool because I can say, hey, what's the difference between the two? So example of that would be, hey, show me things that are inside of Active Directory, so discovered by Microsoft Active Directory, but then are missing from something like, for example, my Ivanti Endpoint Manager. So now I've very easily been able to tell you what is the difference between all of those numbers. Oh, it's exactly 34 devices, and if I click on devices here, it's going to take me to that and show me exactly those 34 devices that are in Active Directory but are missing from Endpoint Manager. I need to go worry about these. There's something I need to control in order to do that. So very easy to get that information out. You've got other things like reimage or replace. Why should we be reimaging machines or replacing them? Reimaging would be a good example of it's got lots of RAM and CPU, it's still under warranty, but it's got an old version of Windows 10 on it. It's running 1709 or something like that. Whereas replace would be, hey, it's got not enough RAM, not enough CPU, and it's out of warranty. You should just go get rid of it. So here you can see we have got the different stats around Windows versions and device warranty and where you're at in the Windows life cycle associated with it. So a very easy way to determine reimage or replace. So again, lots of different reports and so forth that are going to be created for you automatically. You don't have to go and make these. We're just going to do it on your behalf. Let's go down here and talk about our software insights. Software insights gives us the ability to better understand the state of our software that we have out there. Now, we can easily go and understand what is installed on the computers. That's pretty straightforward. Hey, you've got 12 copies of Office 2003 installed on it. But the question is, what do we do with that? What are we going to understand about that? Or is that good? Is that bad? I don't know the answer to any of those questions. And so this helps us understand that more and gives me some better insight into it. So sorry, it looks like they have maybe turned it off in my tenant, because none of those buttons are working right now. Okay, so we'll have to show you software insights here a little bit later. Okay, so next let's go up here and talk about neurons. This is one of my favorite features of the product, and that is the hyper-automation. What exactly is hyper-automation? What does that mean? Everyone knows what automation means, and its most common use case is in the data center. we'll do automation as part of a project for onboarding. New employee gets onboarded, let's automatically create their Active Directory account. So that's what we normally think of when we think of automation, is back-end data center stuff. But we have, on the front end, we have lots of use cases for automation, actually out at the endpoint. So here would be a couple of examples of that. Let's go and actually create a Neurons for Healing here. And let's create a brand new neuron. It's going to be kind of a blank slate for us. The idea is, on the left-hand side, we have a query. We can look for certain things. And then we can also take action against that. And then we have some other actions like filtering or PowerShell or things like that. So what would be some use cases for this? Well, as an example, let's go down here and let's pick something like, I don't know, how about web latency? All right, I want to, on my workstations, everyone's at their house right now, I want to have them reach out to google.com, and if it's greater than 900 milliseconds of latency, I want to do something. What could I do? Well, maybe I want to display a notification. I want to pop up. So I'm going to connect these two together. I'm going to pop up and say, your Wi-Fi sucks, or something like that. Move closer to the router. Maybe that's helpful, maybe it's not. You can determine that. But maybe I want to create another action. Like, for example, I want to go create a ticket. I could have a ticket created automatically if their Wi-Fi is slow. Could you imagine the look on the user's face if they got a phone call and we said, hey, we're monitoring your performance and we noticed that your Wi-Fi is not working very well. Is there something we can do to assist? I mean, they'd fall out of their chair and be absolutely shocked at that level of customer service. So, that would just be one example. What other kinds of things could we do? Well, what about like a hard drive? How many times do we have a hard drive that's potentially failing and we didn't even know about it? So I could always be probing the smart health of that particular hard drive, run it through a filter that says, okay, I don't care about healthy drives, so I'm going to go down here and look at the property of, status. I want status not equals to healthy or whatever the smart status is. And then if that ever becomes not healthy, let's go create a ticket, or let's pop up with a message, or let's do some kind of action. So you can see we can have it, looking for things constantly, and then, taking action upon that. Now, take a look at your top 10 help desk tickets that you get when people are calling in. Sure, number 1 is going to be password reset, but what about number 2 through 10? I bet about 50% of them are potential for automating. Not all of them. There's plenty of stuff where, we're not going to put your help desk out of a job anytime soon. But, I bet there's, 3 or 4 in there that are very common problems that are happening regularly that we could potentially automate. So, whether that's they're missing a process, or they've got blue screen crashes, or, they're installing a certain version of software, or their antivirus is out of date, or their disk encryption is off, or, they're having bad disk performance, or they have certain TLS connections, or, anything like that. So I can search for all of those different things, and then lots of different actions, downloading files, turning on firewalls, rebooting, logging off the user, sending emails, creating tickets, and then we've got some great things down here like actually interacting with Microsoft Teams or PowerShell or a bash action over on Mac. So those are kind of cop-outs so that you could do anything. I can make a PowerShell script to do almost anything in the world, and so I can have it kick out to that. So now you're going to go and create these to be always running. That's what Neurons for Healing is doing, always checking on these things, potentially solving problems not before they happen, but as they happen, and either involving us or even sometimes solving the problem on its own. A full disk up here. One of these is like free disk space, and then another action we have down here is to clean up that disk. So you'll be connecting those two together and cleaning up disks automatically, not waiting for the user to call in and say I'm out of disk space. These neurons are now usable to you in the device one-on-one view. And kind of, I'll go back to this. We started over here where we were looking at the device dashboard for this particular machine. Over here on the right-hand side, the first ones that we looked at were all happening automatically. This, I actually have custom actions where a technician would choose to run it. Not always can we detect that the problem is there, but there's plenty of times you're going, oh, we got this problem. It's this 4-page long document to fix the problem, and I don't know how to do it. Well, let's turn that into an action here, and then the user can just the analyst can just press this button, and those actions will kick off on our device at the end out there. So that's our one-on-one actions that we have associated with Neurons for Healing. The reason I bring that up is when it comes to licensing, we've got lots of different ways to kind of skin this cat. In one way, this is the edge intelligence view, and running these one-on-one is not necessarily the same as running them, kind of across the board. Okay, so we showed a little bit more about our neurons for healing. We talked about our edge intelligence and how we can find out more about those individual machines. We talked about the discovery. There's a couple of other tidbits in here where we have things like looking at it from a user's perspective, where I can point to Active Directory and get more insight into my users that I have. So remember, Active Directory is notoriously bad at information like computers, but user information it's actually halfway decent at, because it's oftentimes our central repository for that. So here I have a user. Maybe April calls up with a particular problem. It's going to go and query and show me their Active Directory status. Is their computer locked? Or is their account locked? Is their password set to expire? What groups do they belong to? What devices are they using? And then over here on the side, I can create different actions. Maybe I need to reset their password or unlock their account. Some of our connectors go both directions, and that's an example of like resetting the password. Not only do we scoop up information from Active Directory and bring it into the ecosystem, I can actually reach back out in the opposite direction and do something like potentially resetting their password. So those are really cool features that we have. Now I'm going to jump over into a different tenant really quick, because I want to show you a couple of cool new features that we have, and they haven't been turned on in that other tenant that was showing off here. So let me log in here really quick. We have the ability to patch. So if we go down here to our patch settings, we took the patching engine that we have inside of Endpoint Manager and inside of our security controls product, and we ported it up here to the Neurons platform. Now, back to kind of Dave's question that he asked earlier, hey, do we think that we are going to get rid of our Endpoint Manager as part of this? The answer is probably not, unless you have relatively simple patching needs. But here's how you would create it. I'd go in here and say, okay, I want my corporate laptops. This is how my corporate laptops are going to be patched. I want critical and important and moderate security patches as an example, or maybe I want to go and do it at an individual vendor level. I want all of the manufacturers except for maybe not Java, because maybe in my world I have problems with patching Java, so I'm going to go turn that one off. Or maybe I want to do it based on the patch group, where I can create an approved patch list, and just whatever patches get added to that would be applied to this particular group. You can see I can do a pre-deployment reboot. I can do a post-deployment reboot. I can interact with the user, let the user snooze it, different things like that, and then set the recurrence. When is this going to happen? Are we going to run it on reboot if they miss the schedule? Do we do it monthly on a certain time? Should we do it a certain number of days after Patch Tuesday? Yeah, let's do it 10 days after Patch Tuesday or something like that. Or should we stage the content so that we're copying the files down? Patches can be big and hefty these days, so why don't we copy the files down 23 hours ahead of time and then actually execute them at a later date? So it's that same engine and database that you've used and known from those other products, and it's just been ported up inside of the Neurons platform. So if you want cloud-based patching, it's a relatively new feature, but now we have you covered. The next thing I want to show you is our ability to, I'm going to show you a future feature, so be forewarned, this is not out in the platform today, but it's coming very soon. And it has to do with our ability to understand when configuration changes. So here's a good example. We've got someone who picks up the phone and calls in and says, hey, my laptop was working great last week and it's not working this week. And what is a typical thing we're going to train our analysts to ask a question about? They're going to say, well, what changed? Well, what is the user going to say when we say what changed? They're going to say, well, nothing. Of course nothing changed. That's their default answer. Well, what I'm going to do here is I'm going to have the system take snapshots of that configuration on a regular basis, and then I have the ability to compare two snapshots. So here I'm comparing two different snapshots of that device, and then I can see what has changed on there. What is the difference between those two environments? And we can kind of scroll through here and say no change, no change, no change. But then down here at the bottom, absolutely, wait, what happened on this exact date? Look, I've installed a bunch of software. They installed Zoom and Bonjour and Apple and iTunes. All of that was not there in the previous configuration. And so this gives me the ability to understand what has changed over time. And this is a game changer. This is a huge feature in terms of troubleshooting our devices and being able to find out what has changed over time. Again, recap, this is a beta feature right now. It's not available in all tenants, but I've heard from product management that it's going to be coming out in the not too distant future.
That's really cool. This is the first time I've seen that, and that's That's a nice feature.
Yeah, that configuration drift is just such a problem that we have in technology, and we've implemented things like change management and so forth to potentially help try and solve some of these problems. But your typical workstation, it doesn't have any of that. We don't keep track of what changes over time, and so our analysts have to be detectives, and they have to dig deep to find out this. And some of this we don't even really track. Now, I've got a quick and easy snapshot right into it. I can feed it right into the analyst view of what potentially changed. I could see some really cool things in the future. I'm going to talk about futures for a second. That this is not available, but what if we had this information that was automatically presented right to an analyst when they're opening up a ticket? So the very first thing when they open up the ticket, they say, "Hey, by the way, these 5 things have changed over the past week." Wouldn't that be a really cool thing to do? So we have that data. It exists over here in the Neurons platform. It doesn't bring it over to the incident already, but that's kind of a cool feature that we could have potentially in the future.
I was hoping to see cryptominer.exe in that.
Crypto miner, hey, you never know. That sounds like a great thing to get into. We'll send out the recording, or you can find it on our YouTube page, I think, that we did a ransomware event that we showed more about neurons, that we did that very thing. Hey, show me who's connecting to the command and control server, or who's running this particular application. And we've got some various neurons that we have created in here. A couple of our sample ones are that very thing. A neuron for healing can be kind of always running, but it can also just run on a schedule or whatever you want. Look, I've got this crypto mining varium, whatever random cryptocurrency that is, where it would actually go and detect it and interact with the user and run a PowerShell action to uninstall that. And so you can create some cool neurons for healing actions that would help go clean up some of that mining software or things like that. Let them mine on their own time. Okay, a couple of questions here. What about rollout projects like EPM? So no, the new patching technology doesn't have rollout projects in the same way. Kind of what you see is what you get in terms of that configuration. It follows the similar kind of logic where we're talking about the recurrence. We're saying when it happens, what's going to stage, and so forth. So I would say it's not exactly a rollout project per se. It's more like an automatic engine built into the patching ecosystem to accomplish the same goal. So it's not called rollout. It doesn't work in the same kind of step-style methodology, but it's got a lot of those same components where we can base it based on Super Tuesday. We can stage the patches ahead of time. We can force a reboot and so forth. But it's not that same kind of, well, let's go create a 12-step plan of all the things that we're going to do throughout this process. It just does it a little bit differently. And like I said, this is a relatively new feature, and so it's going to improve and change over time. And I would expect it to have, potentially more steps and more actions and things like that as part of it. Okay, so I've kind of showed you the big picture on what's going on with the neurons. Probably one last thing we didn't talk about was patch intelligence. Our patch intelligence gives us the ability to have more insight into what the actual patches are. And so this gives us, they may not have that. Oh no, it's still set up in this tenant. It has the ability to give me insight into these vulnerabilities. So when I want to know more about, like, is there actually a CVE exploiting this? Are there CVEs out there that I need to worry about? In this case, there is a critical CVE that is a ransomware CVE associated with it. So I need to go in and pay extra attention to it. We have this thing called the VRR, the Vulnerability Risk Rating. This came from that recent acquisition of RiskSense. That gives us the ability to prioritize our vulnerabilities. For those that aren't aware of it, it's sometimes hard to understand where do I start when it comes to patching. My Rapid7 or Qualys or scanning engine, whatever it is, it found 100,000 items. Well, now what? Where on earth do I start? It creates this really cool thing called a weaponization funnel. I actually have access to it right here. No reason I can't log into it really quick. It creates this weaponization funnel that makes it so that I know how to prioritize. What am I going to do next? Sorry, it's got a multi-factor on here. Let me log into it really quick. 705142. And what it does is it says, where should I start in terms of patching, instead of just that list of 100,000 items. So first of all, you have to worry about things that have been weaponized. So 119,000 total findings. What is weaponized? That's more than just a theory. You know, if a piece of software has a bug in it, that just is a vulnerability. But if someone's now actively exploiting it, hey, someone went and wrote a piece of software that can exploit that vulnerability, that means it's been weaponized. So we've shrunk it from 119,000 down to 27,000 here with weaponized. But then the next thing is, how do I actually exploit that? If it's, well, you've got to have the laptop and you've got to reboot it and press F7 as it reboots and, you know, hold your finger in your ear, then you can exploit it. That's not the same as remote code execution, RCE, or privilege escalation, where, oh, if someone emails you a link across the internet and you click on the link, bam, they own your machine. So those are different. So we care mostly about the remote code execution and privilege escalation. So look, we've narrowed it down to 10,500. And then lastly, we have trending. You know, this is an example of, are there any big geopolitical events in the world, as an example, that we are monitoring and paying attention to, and they're exploiting certain things. So now I've boiled it down to 153. From 119,000 to 153, I need to pay attention to this. Do I still need to patch everything? Absolutely. But where do I start? What do I prioritize? So I can prioritize it based on the weaponization funnel here, but then also the asset criticality. You know, if my primary server that has all my customer data on it is not the same as a test print server, so I can categorize that. And then even give you this risk and security score here. That it's kind of like a credit score, very easy way to get a snapshot of how am I doing, what's healthy, what's unhealthy, things like that. So we actually bring that information of that risk score, that VRR, here into the patch intelligence itself to give you a little bit more insight to say, hey, what do I go and do with this vulnerability? Should I pay extra attention to it? Is it something I need to be, you know, concerned about? Okay, so that was a quick run through of the technology that I want to talk about today with our Neurons platform.
Can I step you back for just a second? Because
yes,
there's
please.
another question. Derek wants to know, can self-healing detect something like a stalled Outlook plugin and remediate it?
Let's go in there to our Neurons. I don't think we have a specific one that talks about a stalled process. We've got some that are kind of around that, things like application crashes, where we could look for certain executables and seeing if they're crashing. We could look for things like in the event viewer, if we found a particular event that would show up in the event viewer, or if it was like something with something in the security log here, or running processes. You know, so some of these might tackle that. We just don't have a specific one that says look for stalled plugins. But you could say if they're missing a process, or if it shows up in the event log, or if it actually full-on crashes, let's do something about it. So if it was a application crash, for example, and it was, you know, Outlook plugin.exe, and it actually officially crashes, then yes, we could have that be part of the process. And, you know, maybe you're going to display a notification, or maybe you're just going to restart a service, or you're going to tell them to reboot the computer or log off the user or something like that. So you could potentially do that kind of thing with it. We would just have to go through that exact test case to see if application crashes picks up on that very thing that you're talking about.
Juan asked for a little more clarification on the licensing. Is it based on the number of endpoints being managed? Do you offer on-premise or just cloud?
Good question. So number one, it is cloud only. All the technology is built in the cloud. There is not an on-premise edition. The connector server is our way that we use those connectors. Like we might need to connect to on-premise Active Directory or on-premise EPM. So we have a connector server, which is an on-premise component, but it ultimately is a cloud service. You need to have it up in the cloud. And it's pretty straightforward licensing. So if we go home here, you can see the different things that we have. We have Neurons for discovery, Neurons for healing, Neurons for patch intelligence, Neurons for edge intelligence, Neurons workspace, spend intelligence, etc. All these different components. You just simply get the platform. That's the underlying kind of base product. And then you just add on what you want. Oh, if you want discovery, great, we add discovery. You want healing, great, we add healing. And it's based on the number of agents that you're going to go and install out there. So pretty straightforward. If you've got 4,000 desktops and laptops, you buy 4,000 licenses of the platform and then 4,000 licenses of discovery as an example for that. You're not going to pay for those additional items that we're going to discover if we're finding a printer or a router or switch or things like that. Those will not consume a license. But great questions. Okay, so we're just going to wrap it up here. I hope you enjoyed your lunch. Again, if you had any problems, please email Alyssa and she can help you out. and we can make sure that you get fed while we give you a quick run through of the Neurons product. I would highly recommend that if you saw something that you liked here today, or you enjoyed what you saw and you want to see it inside your environment, just like Dave was talking about earlier on, let's hit you up with a Neurons POC. We have the ability to fire up a tenant for you. It's very, very low impact to your network. You can test on just a couple of machines. There's not a lot of effort that it takes to get up and going. You can be an expert in it in a couple of hours. It is a very simple and straightforward product. So if you're one of the first 10 people to request a POC, you can get a free home automation gift card, and Larry can help work out the details on that. So that's kind of a motivation to have you go kick the tires on a proof of concept around Neurons. Thank you very much for attending today. I know your time is valuable, so I appreciate you coming and spending some time with me, having some lunch and so forth. If you have any questions, please hit up your NCSI salesperson. They'll be reaching out to you as well, so it should be easy. They can get a hold of me if you want a more in-depth demo. This was just a high-level overview. Most likely you're going to want to see more individual details if necessary. So I'm more than happy to give you another demonstration to show how it would work with your exact ecosystem, or how it would integrate with the other components. We didn't get into a lot of those details around how it integrates with asset management or endpoint management or service management or things like that, but we could go and show it in your exact use case. So thank you again for attending. I hope everyone has a great day. Bye.